At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Hello, cuties. You're about to listen to an extremely juicy episode about David Lynch's masterpiece, Mulholland Drive. You only get the first part for free on the main feed, but if you want to listen to the entire 4.5-hour long episode where Carr and I do a deep dive and analyze every scene of this film, you've got to sign up for my Patreon, patreon.com/girlsgutsjallo. patreon.com/girlsgutsjallo. Or you can sign up on Spotify subscriptions or Apple subscriptions. But you get so much more bang for your buck if you sign up for my Patreon. You get my whole back catalog of bonus episodes. You get a Discord community. You get screenings, a book club. Sometimes I do rogue commentary for some of my favorite movies. You get to talk to me directly and be part of my little community that I'm curating. So again, patreon.com/girlsgutsjallo. I'm a fully independent creator. This is my entire source of income. I do this 24/7. I work 6 days a week. I work super hard bringing you all of that juicy, juicy bonus content. So join me on Patreon. Mwah.
You must tell me all your secrets. Remember, we must share everything together. Everything.
Well, hello again, listeners. You're listening to Girls, Guts, and Giallo. And I'm Annie Rose Malamet. Hi, Carr.
Hi, Mommy.
You're back.
I'm back. I'm back on the pod. Annie's actually had me locked in a cage since the last podcast. It's my first time being let out to see the sun. And I'm ecstatic. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be here.
And we're talking about our beloved David Lynch, who passed away recently.
Rest in peace, David. We're both still devastated, literally.
I'm still so devastated about it.
It's been really difficult, honestly. I will say it's been wonderful to be going through his full filmography again and just revisiting all of his work, but a true one of kind, deeply missed.
Yeah, something you said to me recently, because I said, I was like, I just can't stop watching David Lynch. You were like, yeah, I want to be in his world. And
yeah,
that's exactly what it feels like. This death hit me hard.
Yeah. No, literally both me and Annie were like unwell the day he died. What was that tweet that we saw? That was so funny.
Which one?
Oh, the tweet that was like, I don't know who David Lynch is, but all my white friends seem to have loved him.
No, yeah, it was like a stupid, shitty meme that was like, I don't know who David Lynch is, but if all my white friends are hurting, then gosh darn it, I'm hurting too. And Tashanae said that was her, but she does know who David Lynch is.
She does, and she watches. But yeah, no, it's been devastating. But on the upside, it's like all these 35 millimeter screenings of his movies, like all this interest. As a quick aside, I literally mother, aka Isabella Rossellini, who is unrelated to Mulholland Drive, but related to David Lynch,
And Blue Velvet, which
um,
we did an episode on.
which we did an episode on, has a picture of me in her phone that was sent to her by the DP of the movie that I'm working on, which it did make my year, and I feel connected to her and to him. So that's lifting me through.
You're riding that high.
I'll be riding that high for the rest of my life.
Carr, can you reintroduce yourself to the listeners?
Absolutely. I'm Carr Conaway. I'm a filmmaker and an artist. I love experimental film. I work in production, and I'm a leather dyke. I'm an as you said before, and a butler, a service person, as you will. I work in homes with beautiful women. But yeah, no, that's me. That's a terrible introduction.
No, I feel like it says a lot about you.
Yeah, that's me. I'm so happy to be back. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, our Blue Velvet episode was my most listened to episode of the year.
I was gagged, absolutely gagged and honored. It's such an amazing film. I mean, people love that movie too. That's like, I hope that the same energy comes for Mulholland Drive. It's like we both been so daunted to do this episode because it's such a complex film to try and dissect in a few hours.
I'm honestly really
It's
intimidated.
yeah.
Taking notes was really difficult, so I kind of just am like Charlie Kelly with the red string on the board. Like, I have a million tabs open. I know that I'm going to fail in referencing everything that I want to reference because it's just too much to keep in my head. And every time I try to understand this film, I just get deeper into like a little pocket of it. And then I become even more confused. And I think that trying to really understand this movie there's a futility in that. And I think that David Lynch would have really liked that. I don't necessarily think he would support us as podcasters going through every single detail and poring over it. He was kind of famous for, he wanted people to feel the movies, and he would say things like, people always want you to talk about the movie afterwards, but like the movie is the talking. And
Right. And he's so averse to linguistics as a way to explain and find coherence about his movies, and very like just very anti words, not anti-intellectualism, but just a different kind of I guess intellectualism is more felt than said, which I really deeply appreciate about his work. That being said, we're going to dissect the shit out of this word by word, scene by scene.
Yeah, and like as a writer and a podcaster, like I deal in words. So that's, how I make sense of art. But that's part of the appeal of David Lynch's filmography, is that it just escapes that. And you can make an attempt, but so much of the film and understanding the film is about feeling it and experiencing it. So especially with something like this.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always really relate to what David Lynch has said about the way he kind of reacts to the response to his films, especially in response to people wanting him to explain what he either meant or like what the actual plot of something was. I like that he has this kind of irreverence for explaining that away, because I think, especially coming from like an experimental perspective, where the narrative is not necessarily what you're not going to be needing to focus on. I think it shifts the interpretation onto the viewer, and he's just saying, I'm not going to explain it for you, just you figure it out. And also it's not going to have one meaning or one explanation. So I definitely relate to that, to his philosophy around his the not explaining his films.
Well, Carr, you're in New York right now.
I
And
am.
you're working on a film.
I truly am. I've only been out here for 4 days, but it feels like it's been months.
And we're talking about a film that is about the film industry in many ways. So
hmm
pertinent, if you will.
Absolutely.
And we're talking, of course, about Mulholland Drive from 2001. So
I feel like we should sing "Crying" by Robinson to get us into it.
maybe you should.
I bet your listeners, they're just dying to hear the rendition of that. No, we can plug that in somewhere else. Whoa, almost falling off my chair. Shall we get into this? I'm
Well,
scared.
I want to know when you first saw this movie and what you felt about it when you saw it.
Good question. When I first saw this movie, I actually don't remember the first time that I saw this movie. I believe I was in college. I think I saw it when I was like 19. I don't remember seeing it before then. First time I watched it, I had no idea what the actual what to make of it, like what the meaning of it was. I knew I really had enjoyed the experience of watching it, but I left the viewing experience feeling very confused. Like I don't and I tend not to analyze at first. I feel I'm like also just not I'm not necessarily very focused on plot in general, as you've experienced when we watch movies together. Like I will forget incredibly important plot points and character developments and relations, and instead favor what I have been kind of sensing or interpreting from the film. And oftentimes I will just have complete plot drops. So this movie actually was very friendly to me in that regard, because you don't necessarily have to be following the exact quote unquote plot to kind of get an understanding of the film. But yeah, that was my first experience with it, was just feeling very confused and not knowing exactly what to think. But having loved the performances, and loved the styling of the film, felt very drawn to the kind of like all the homages to old Hollywood, these very strong women characters. I was fascinated by the lesbian um, dichotomy here, but didn't know what to make of it. What was your first experience with this film?
Well, I saw this film pretty shortly after it came out. I must have been like 11 or 12 when
Oh wow.
when it came out. Yeah, I'm old.
Well, I'm just surprised you saw it when you were 11.
I didn't see it at 11.
Like,
I saw it a couple years later. I must have been like 13.
mm,
Um, and because I didn't see it in theaters or anything. I saw it when my dad like rented it off Netflix or something. Like back when
mm.
you would get DVDs.
I remember that time.
The halcyon days. And I remember watching it with my childhood friend, and I remember when the man comes around the corner behind Winky's, I screamed bloody murder.
Oh,
Like it was
yeah.
so scary to me.
Yeah.
And I just remember also like the sex scene. I already knew at that time that I liked girls, and I remember being so transfixed by that scene. And I also remember
Yeah.
when they're saying, when Betty's like, I'm in love with you. I remember my friend Emma, who's straight, was like, all right, shut up and get back to the sex.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Komm du noch?
If you've had that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
My God, that's so fucking funny. I feel like seeing that, I was like, oh, David Lynch gets lesbianism.
Well, you know, he's been fiercely criticized for his utilization of the male gaze. We'll talk about it.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that.
I'm sure we will. I don't even know how long this episode's going to be, but
17 hours.
Well, like I was saying, you could have a whole podcast just on this movie.
Truly.
It's so complex. There's so many references. I'm using many sources. I will try to cite them as best I can. And one of the sources I'm using is a website that has been up since the movie came out. Called Mulholland-Drive.net. And I remember reading this website back in the day when I was trying to understand this movie as a 13-year-old. And I was delighted to see that it's still up and being tended to. And
is it still being updated?
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
It seems like it.
It's like such an incredibly extensive website. Like you would have to go. Just the theories page alone, I'm like, you open up a giant can of worms.
Yeah. And they still have like a forum and a guest book. And I love kind of seeing these like vestiges of the old internet still going. And, you know, some of this website, like some of the theories that I've read on here, I'm like, I don't know. Like it feels like a bit of a reach, or like maybe just not something that's we're supposed to literally understand. So it's a very like literal. It's very literal. Like every single thing is dissected, and it can be really useful in some ways. And then in some ways, I was I was reading it and I was like, I'm just getting more confused. Like I need to go back to what I'm feeling about the movie and not so much like what means what.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, this is a film that gets dissected in like so many different ways, and oftentimes there can be such like almost like a film bro kind of rhetoric around dissecting this movie, which is like, well, actually, David Lynch, when he put that character in, he actually and it's like you could read it that way, but there's this film truly kind of dissecting whether there's just so many ways to interpret it, whether it's dream or reality, and does that really matter at the end of the day? But there's just such an endless there's so many endless ways to interpret this film.
So I wanted to start our discussion by talking about Lynch's 10 clues to unlock the film, which are documented on mulhollanddrive.net. And user Rich W introduces these clues. And they say, the idea leading his viewers on a paper chase seems a little unconvincing, as it goes against Lynch's usual habit of letting his work stand alone. I think you have to consider the fact that Lynch was pressured to come up with these clues by the French production company that was losing millions. When these were released, the film was a disaster financially, and the general buzz at the time was that there was no plot to figure out. I think the clues are important and relevant, but not necessarily the 10 clues Lynch would really give if he wanted us to figure out what his exact intentions were. He said before these were released and after they were released that he would never reveal what Mulholland Drive meant to him. It was up to everyone to have their own vision. So here are the 10 clues. Clue number 1. Pay particular attention to the beginning of the film. At least 2 clues are revealed before the credits. Clue number 2. Notice appearances of the red lampshade. Clue number 3. Can you hear the title of the film that Adam Kesher is auditioning actresses for? Is it mentioned again? Clue number 4. An accident is a terrible event. Notice the location of the accident. Clue number 5. Who gives a key and why? Clue number 6. Notice the robe, the ashtray, the coffee cup. Clue number 7. What is felt, realized, and gathered at the Club Silencio? Clue number 8. Did talent alone help Camilla? Clue number 9. Note the occurrences surrounding the man behind Winkies. And clue number 10. Where is Aunt Ruth? So
I love the dramatic reading of the clues.
You would.
I know, I'm like, we're in the thriller. We're here. I've not read these 10 clues, actually. I can't believe he even gave these. That's incredible.
Yeah, and then, of course, on the website, there's like writings about the clues that I'm not going to read because I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the stuff that's said here. But and then it also says at the bottom of the page, while avoiding a detailed deconstruction, David Lynch has given some clues to the interpretation of Mulholland Drive, both to the sequence of events and the underlying meaning. On the back cover of the Mulholland Drive video, he describes the film as follows. Act 1, she found herself the perfect mystery. Act 2, a sad illusion. Act 3, love. User Bunter says the perfect mystery presumably refers to Rita's identity, and she is Betty. But note the ambiguous words Lynch chose. She found herself rather than the she found. It could be read, she found herself to be the perfect mystery. The mystery could refer to Betty's real identity as well as to Rita's. Act 2 begins when Rita wakes up crying, Silencio. The sad illusion is show business, and also perhaps the unreciprocated love of Betty for Rita. Act 3 begins when Diane awakes. It shows Diane's abiding love for Camilla, in the face of Camilla's rejection and her unwillingness to permit a world in which she and Camilla are apart. I also want to talk about this guide for newcomers that they have on the mulhollanddrive.net site. And I want to talk about what is kind of like the accepted interpretation of this movie. So, as it says on the site, Diane Selwyn is a struggling actress in Hollywood. She moved to LA from Deep River, Ontario after winning a jitterbug competition that inspired her to become an actress. We descend into the pillow at the start of the film from Diane Selwyn's point of view. From now until the moment we see her wake from the bed, Diane is dreaming. She dreams that she is Betty, a fresh-faced actress living in Hollywood. She dreams that Rita stumbles into her apartment after an accident, having lost her memory. She dreams that she wows the various assembled showbiz people at her audition. The dream climaxes with the haunting Club Silencio, the disappearance of Betty, and the opening of the Blue Cube back at Havenhurst. A knocking on the door awakes Diane from her bed, and she raises herself from her slumber to answer the door. The scenes that follow are intended to illustrate the breakdown of a relationship between Diane and Camilla and subsequent mental collapse of Diane. Tricky thing is that Lynch presents them to us in a nonlinear style. It's up to you to decide the chronological order of these scenes, but the crux of this interpretation is that it is inferred that Diane hires a hitman to kill Camilla. So from this point of view, the flashbacks can be seen as Diane's attempt to justify the murder in her mind, and the dream is an attempt to relive and reimagine Diane's life since her arrival in LA. This is just the framework of a popular interpretation. The fun really begins when you start to explore the connections between people, places, and props in the two sections of this film and gain a greater overall understanding of Mulholland Drive. So that is, you know, if you don't know by now and you're a listener of this podcast, it's a spoiler heavy podcast. We are going to go scene by scene in this. And that is I keep thinking about how that fucking mean reviewer left a comment on my podcast that I have the most spitty mouth ever. And I'm like, I'm sorry that I'm swallowing.
Also, sorry for the compliment. Yeah, I'm moist in my mouth. Sorry that I'm wet in my mouth.
Right. Like, fuck you, whoever that was.
As if that were an insult. You're like, yeah, I'm well hydrated. Fuck
right.
off. Stop
Sorry.
listening.
Yeah. And anyway, I keep swallowing. So I keep thinking about that little bitch who left that comment.
Well, I haven't noticed it once. Keep going.
Another person that said I have the worst vocal fry ever.
Well, when people say that stuff, they're literally jacking off as they comment it. So, take it with a grain of salt, as it were.
So let's get into it. All right. So
here we go.
Mulholland Drive actually was originally conceived as a television series. It began as a 90-minute pilot that was intended for ABC. Tony Krantz, the agent who was responsible for the development of Twin Peaks, was really fired up about doing another Lynch TV series, and Lynch sold the idea to ABC executives based only on the story of Rita emerging from the car accident with her purse containing $125,000 in cash and the blue key, and Betty trying to help her figure out who she is. An ABC executive recalled, I remember the creepiness of this woman in this horrible, horrible crash, and David teasing us with the notion that people are chasing her. She's not just in trouble, she is trouble. Obviously, we asked what happens next, and David said, you have to buy the pitch for me to tell you. Lynch showed ABC a rough cut of the pilot. The person who saw it, according to Lynch, was watching it at 6 a.m. and was having coffee and standing up, and he hated the pilot, and ABC immediately canceled it. Pierre Edelman, Lynch's friend from Paris, came to visit and started talking to him about the film being a feature. Edelman goes back to Paris, and then Canal says they want to give Lynch money to make it into a feature, and it took a year to negotiate. So I haven't seen the pilot. I would be interested to see it.
Yeah, I would also be interested to see the pilot. Do you know if I wonder if it exists in that form?
I think so.
Anywhere that you can find.
I bet it does. Lynch casts Naomi Watts and Laura Harring by their photographs. He called them in separately for half-hour interviews and told them that he had not seen any of their previous works in film or television. Herring was actually involved in a minor car accident on the way to the first interview, which is very spooky because obviously her character is involved in a car accident in the beginning of the film.
Hated.
Watts arrived wearing jeans for the first interview. I'm wearing jeans.
I'm wearing jeans.
Which is an inside joke because my father always insists on wearing jeans everywhere, even if it's like
you
fancy.
sobbing as
you
sobbing as a child.
Yeah. Side note, when I was a little glamorous femme, my mom helped me. My dad was going to take me to the Nutcracker. I'm from New York, so I'm a cultured child, and my dad was going to take me to the Nutcracker, and I was so excited, and I got all dressed up, and I was in this like white lace dress, and my hair was all done up, and my dad comes out in jeans, and I burst into tears.
You were like, you're so unglamorous.
And my mom was like, put on a suit, Paul.
That's literally torture to a little femme child.
I was so like, you know that tweet that's like, I never did like Ed, Ed, and Eddie. I could sense something unchic was afoot. That was me. I was like, this is so unchic.
You're like, I'll die if I'm out the scene with you looking like that.
So anyway,
Obsessed.
so Watts arrives wearing jeans direct from the plane from New York, and Lynch asked her to return the next day more glammed up. Me. She was offered the part 2 weeks later, and Lynch explained his selection of Watts. I saw someone that I felt had a tremendous talent, and I saw someone who had a beautiful soul and intelligence, possibilities for a lot of different roles. So it was a beautiful full package. Which is lovely. I love how much he cared for and loved his actors.
Yeah, he had a very special intuition for actors, especially ones that weren't given a ton of opportunity, like, or that were being given their first opportunity, like Isabella Rossellini, Laura Dern, like all these incredibly talented women, and Kyle MacLachlan too. Like he wasn't, he really had a great intuition.
Kyle MacLachlan is definitely woman coded, so it tracks.
Absolutely.
And Justin Theroux also met Lynch directly after his plane flight. And Lynch liked his look and decided to cast Adam wearing like disheveled clothes, because he came in the interview directly off the plane, so he looked like disheveled with untidy hair. And Lynch liked that and kind of kept that in his character. And Mulholland Drive premiered at the 2001 Cannes Film Festival in May to major critical acclaim, and Lynch was awarded the Best Director prize at the festival.
Which is actually kind of the way that this film had mainstream success is kind of astounding in this current climate.
And yet not, because it was also struggling financially when it came out. Like, I think it had a lot of success with like the art house crowd.
Right, critically acclaimed.
Yeah, critically acclaimed, but I think people were like, what the fuck is this about?
Right. Yeah.
But David Lynch is one of those experimental surrealist filmmakers that did break into the mainstream. I mean, Twin Peaks was a hugely popular television show, and my parents watched it when it was on, and they were like, we had no idea what was going on. And I just love the idea of people watching that show every week and just not having any idea what's going on.
Literally.
So Lynch says in his 10 clues, that the first clues happen before the opening credits, and we open right on swing dancers going wild on this bright purple background with like lively jazz music playing, and they're all in these classic 50s outfits. And I'm going to refer to her right now as Betty, Naomi Watts. And there's this overlay of Betty and this old couple that we later are introduced to. So let's see what mulhollanddrive.net has to say about this.
Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Xyzal is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Xyzal keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all. Take Xyzal. At night.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
About the swing dancing.
The jitterbug contest. So
and that shot of the jitterbug too, that completely eluded me in my probably first 2 watches of this film. I completely eradicated that shot from my mind. Like, it didn't click for me as anything. And it's one of those, there's so many intricate details in this film that you kind of have to come back to. And even that couple, you're like, when you think about this couple that Betty comes off the plane with, this older, seemingly like Midwestern couple that are just sunshine and rainbows, and they're Betty, oh, Betty, we just it was so lovely to meet you. It's easy to forget that they creep back in multiple places.
Yeah, so we kind of immediately get introduced to this old couple, and in order of appearance, the credits list Betty well before Diane, which is probably significant and makes me think like, oh, it goes back to that clue number one. And there's somebody is shouting Betty, Betty off screen, and then the scene fades into Diane's bedroom. There's this what we now kind of know is Diane's bedroom. If you were just watching this, you wouldn't, for the first time, you wouldn't know that. But there's a shot of heavy breathing as we push into this bed sheet. MulhollandDrive.net also says that there's audio of like someone snorting something, like a drug or something, but I didn't necessarily hear that. But
right,
I believe them. I'm sure that the people that run this website have watched this movie hundreds of times, and so we're kind of immediately disoriented. I also was noticing that this bright purple background that they're jitterbugging against there's like the sheet is kind of like purplish. I think colors are very important in this film. Red and blue together, right, make purple. Yeah. And red and blue are both very important motifs in the film.
Yeah. I mean, and also her bed sheets, when we do see them again, they're red, which has in multiple articles that I read, that came up as like a significant thing.
Yes. Yeah, red and blue figure very heavily in Lynch's work, as we talked about in the Blue Velvet episode.
Yeah.
So we get this shot of the Mulholland Drive road sign, which immediately recalls Sunset Boulevard. Famous.
Yeah.
Another famous like meta cinema film, a movie about making movies. And we immediately kind of get that association, and we just rewatched Sunset Boulevard, which is an incredible film.
Fabulous film. It's such an amazing film. And I mean, it pulls in, it gets mentioned in reference to Lynch quite often. It's one of his, like similar to Wizard of Oz, it shows up in multiple of his films.
Wizard of Oz, Sunset Boulevard, Vertigo.
All these character names as well. Like there's so many things.
So the credits roll as a black limo drives up Mulholland Drive in the night. Mulholland Drive, David Lynch lived on Mulholland Drive. It's a very like twisty, kind of creepy road in Hollywood where a lot of celebs live. So we're immediately...
Well, in David Lynch's world, it's pretty creepy, but otherwise it's not a very creepy road.
I think it's creepy at night.
I suppose at night, but I guess it's made, Mulholland Drive itself is made creepy by Lynch's world, and like the music that we hear, the eeriness gets associated with it.
So we immediately get that Angelo Badalamenti score playing over like these aerial shots of LA lit up at night. I feel like I'm gonna have something to say for every note, and that this episode is gonna be like, again, 17 hours long. So I'm trying to reel it in, but it's hard because I feel like it's immediately so heavy with meaning.
Right. Well, we could also, like talk about multiple notes at once here. And also with this intro scene, it's hard to condense because it really is like almost every shot gives you something to hypothesize about.
Yes.
But Los Angeles plays a huge character in this story. Like the city of Los Angeles is the backdrop for the film, and it becomes so prevalent. Like later on, you see there's all these overlays of the city over Betty or Diane, depending on. Los Angeles is presented to us first lit up at night, and this is kind of I found to be some kind of symbol throughout the film, whether it's Los Angeles at night or in the day. It kind of becomes a different thing.
So the car, we see this close-up shot of Laura Herring in the car looking gorgeous, and she's in the back and she's looking forward at these two men up front, and the car stops and she asks, she says, "We don't stop here." And one of them points a gun at her and tells her to get out, while another car speeds up Mulholland Drive and violently crashes into them before they make it out of the car. The smoke.
But it's clear that she's about to be assassinated here, and you see her kind of Laura Herring looks just like a classic femme fatale and like classic Hollywood glam in this moment.
Yeah, and it kind of starts, the movie kind of starting on this like noir note, and the smoke hovers in the air as the car bursts into flames. Smoke is another motif in this film.
Yeah.
The woman, Laura Herring, nameless to us at this point, struggles to escape the overturned vehicle, and Wobbly gets up looking forlorn and absent after the crash. So she's, in the literature, a lot of writers refer to this as like a transformation. Like she transforms from this femme fatale character into this kind of innocent, naive amnesiac.
Newborn.
Yes, she's newborn.
Don't you think that this moment in the film mirrors Isabella Rossellini's character coming out of the bushes naked in Blue Velvet a bit?
Absolutely. I mean, as she's like making her way into the wilderness towards the lights of LA, that we have a note here about women wandering out of the wilderness after a traumatic event. In Lynch movies, this motif happens with Ronette in Twin Peaks. It happens in Blue Velvet. And this was apparently inspired by a real life event in Lynch's life where he saw a woman walking naked out of the woods when he was a child. And he didn't know what was happening, but he knew it was wrong and bad. And I feel like he does such a brilliant job of capturing that kind of childlike disturbance in these scenes where you like know something is wrong, but you don't know what. Like that is something I experienced a lot as a child. Like if I would see a movie, I remember I saw a movie when I was a kid where a woman gets raped. My parents had no boundaries on what I could and couldn't watch. And
you were watching shit really young.
Yeah, and I didn't understand what rape was at that point, but I knew something was deeply wrong with what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And I feel like he does just a really good job of that.
I also wanted to intersect that I learned recently that Isabella, one of the things that she's trying to emulate in Blue Velvet when she's coming out of the bushes was that there's that famous photograph of the young child in Vietnam, kind of naked running with his arms out. And she was trying to emulate that. And and you see soldiers in the background, US soldiers terrorizing these children. It also evokes other genocides and atrocities that have been committed by the US, by soldiers, where there's this gross kind of you sense the violence of what's going on, even if it's not like necessarily the violence isn't happening in front of your eyes, but it's a symbol of violence that has already happened. You can sense what's already happened to these people, one of these characters, and it's disturbing to witness.
Yes. She makes it into a city street. She's frightened by the cars passing by. She runs to find a place to take cover. A boisterous couple laughing on the street scares her into taking cover in a bush, where she lies down and closes her eyes, and wondering why this couple scares her so much. Like, why doesn't she ask for help? and she's coming into the world newborn in fear, and
Right. She's like a deer in headlights,
yeah.
so to speak. She has no idea what the intentions of the people around her are, and
Well, the last vestiges
this.
of what she's feeling is the fear that she, she just got a gun pointed at her. She doesn't know what's happened. She doesn't know who she is.
Right.
But she's still feeling that fear.
Yeah.
She knows that she's like kind of a wanted woman in some way. So
Right.
we're now back at the crime scene, where the rest of the victims of the crash are found dead, and two detectives are pondering over the evidence, and they note an earring found at the scene. They say it could be someone's missing, and the detective looks down at the city lights. I love David Lynch's attention to like femininity and like these tiny details. Like he apparently would mix lipstick shades for his actresses himself, to get the exact right lipstick shade, and just this detail of like an earring, and that's going to come up later
Right.
too.
That these these feminine affects are so important, and that it's very specific and intentional what everything is meaning necessarily to him in the story here. I love these. I also love, he always has these podunk, like they're like, could be someone's missing. And it's like a classic detective trope. Like we already see within the first 5 minutes of the film. Also, I'm obsessed with the fact that we're still only on the first scene.
I know.
We'll pick it up, but I will say there's so much setup here, but already you're introduced to a lot of tropes, like a lot of filmic tropes that you would see in, say, a classic kind of thriller. You have the detective, you have the beautiful femme fatale, you have you have a mystery. So there's all these like tropes of a classic Hollywood narrative that we don't know at this point at all, where that there's not a traditional narrative unfolding before us.
Yeah, and I think also like we just have to lean into this being a really long episode, and
yeah,
there's just so much to talk about. So the woman wakes in the bush. It's still night.
I'm like, no, Queen, don't go to bed. You're gonna
And a redheaded woman with old style luggage passes by. We later learn that this is Betty's aunt. And the woman, the amnesiac woman, sneaks further into the apartment complex. And Betty's aunt goes back into her apartment, grabbing her keys. Keys, again, important theme here.
Mm-hmm.
And we see Rita hiding under her table. So she's kind of like snuck into the apartment.
Little scared animal just trying to take cover,
Mm-hmm.
as it were. That was another detail that I missed multiple times watching this film, was the fact that it's Betty's aunt that leaves. So you have this impetus for that feels significant to me in a different way. The kind of the coming and going, and characters that don't actually end up existing in the same realm. Like that's the only time you see this amnesiac woman and the aunt near each other in the film.
We next find ourselves at Winkies.
Winkies! Welcome.
And Winkies, I feel like I'm going to see what MulhollandDrive.net says about Winkies.
That's our North Star, MulhollandDrive.net. Well, they're having, I'll ponder on this for a moment while you read that, but they're having this really intense, bizarre exchange, and we learn that the man talking about his dreams, his name is Dan, but we never learn the identity of the other man opposite him. That's just a guy completely out of context. Some people have hypothesized that to be his therapist or his friend or even a detective. But I find it's already unnerving to land on this exchange between these men that you have no context for, and that don't necessarily reveal themselves in any particular kind of clear way throughout the film. It's very up to interpretation who these two men are in relation to everything else in this movie.
Yeah, and Lynch said about this scene, about his camera work, then that it's it went out. The interviewer was saying it was unsettling camera work. Lynch says that was always part of the idea, part of the nightmare. The crew had to get a special jib arm and work it into a narrow diner and get it so that Peter Deming and the camera could just float. The floating never really stops. It's like drawing a figure of 8 forever. That is from the book Lynch on Lynch.
Yeah.
This Winky's Diner is on Sunset Boulevard, which is important.
Yeah.
And also it's a reference to the Wizard of Oz, because the Winkies are the little people living in the West who are dressed all in yellow and enslaved by the Wicked Witch of the West and later freed by Dorothy. That's in the book, not in the movie. Okay.
And he's talking about his recurring dream here.
Yes.
And it's, he says that the dream starts out at Winky's, it's half night, and he's scared in the dream. And the man he's talking to, he points behind him. He's there by the counter looking at him, also scared. And he describes seeing a man in the back of Winky's scaring him, and that he can see the man through the wall. Also, I will quickly aside that this quote unquote man, to me, always looked to have some kind of, I always thought there could be a comparison made to the Wicked Witch of the West there in her look.
Yeah, it's played by Bonnie Aarons, who does kind of have that look.
Yeah, classic Jewish witch look. But I like that it's referred to as a man. I'm a Jew, so just for reference, by the way.
So the man that Dan is talking to, and he says he hopes he never sees that face outside of the dream.
Yes.
Right? I also want to say that Winky's is like this very like classic Americana diner, and Lynch obviously loves that, and that features in many of his works: Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet. He loved Big Boys, right? Like he loves a diner. So the man gets up and is not quite taking him seriously, and he like goes to the counter, I think, to pay, and he gets up abruptly, and he's standing exactly where Dan has just described him being in the dream. And the man looks forward, Dan looks forward and closes his eyes in fear, feeling his dream come to fruition in front of him.
And you have that classic, the Badalamenti creeping in here, setting the tone, almost like a factory word, like that, where there's like a kind of like tonal, atonal pitch to certain scenes, like where like you can compare that to the sounds that you might hear in a factory of like machinery whirring, and it kind of gives a minor note. It feels like that, where you're like, it's just this constant droning and it's inescapable. At least for myself, I think about that a lot with Lynch's soundscapes here, and how he creates the feeling of being unsettled and the feeling of terror. You're like, it just keeps growing. It doesn't, the sound really plays a big part in feeling how disturbed this man is by this dream.
And Dan is played by Patrick Fischler, I just want to say as an aside, who I think I always like enjoy him when I see him coming up in the movie. I think he's great.
And he features heavily in Twin Peaks: The Return.
Which crazy I haven't seen yet, but I will watch soon when you come back. Okay, so they walk around to the back of the Winkies. Dan is now sweating. There's this ominous corner with an arrow pointing towards the entrance, but in the opposite way. Again, I'm thinking about Wizard of Oz, the Yellow Brick Road. There's this subtle terror here of like everyday places and how creepy just like a corner around a diner can be, and the camera becomes...
and that's
go ahead.
That's I was just gonna say that's also like a dreamlike quality, where you often can dream about a place that feels completely innocuous to you in real life, but in a dream you're like, oh my god, I was in this house, I was in I was in your house and it felt horrible, or like there was something
Yeah.
off about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a dream thing. This like a place that you go every day turns sinister without knowing why.
So the camera becomes Dan's perspective of this as they walk forward towards this fear. We hear this heartbeat sound, and around the corner, all of a sudden, a dark figure looking like someone blackened by soot from a fire, which I feel is important because of the car crash.
Yeah.
Appears and frightens Dan, who faints.
And
It's
this
fucking
is
scary.
So creepy when this happens. I want to talk about the camera work here too, because that kind of perspective switch which happens in this film during the most disturbing moments, the camera work is duplicated, I would say, because they're on a jib at that moment, floating forward essentially, or at least I think it's a jib, the way the motion moves, so it feels like you as the camera, as the viewer, are the perspective walking forward, so it jump scares you in this way when you round the corner and then the music bursts at that moment, really adding to the terror of that moment. But it is so jarring, especially when you haven't seen any of David Lynch's other work. It's like it looks like looking at a burn victim almost, not like someone amidst someone being burned currently, sort of thing.
And I always wonder in this scene too if the man with Dan sees the figure.
Yeah,
like, he doesn't react like he sees him.
Right, he just catches the guy.
Yeah.
I also find it funny how the man seems to like cower behind him a bit. He stays about a foot behind behind Dan when they're walking out there.
So we cut to another man in a strange kind of curtained room, very reminiscent of the Black Lodge. This is Mr. Roke, played by Michael J. Anderson, who is a little person. And he is also in Twin Peaks, and he is in this very strange room, right?
Sitting in a chair that's quite elevated.
And he seems to be like a boss of some kind, and he says into a phone, "The girl is missing." And
really quick, one more thing with this moment, that another thing on the camera work here, the angle, the camera is tilted up onto him, so it kind of gives him a different scale when you look at him, and you often see that angle with characters that Lynch might be, or at least that I interpret as Lynch maybe is suggesting something more sinister, is something I've felt.
And I'm also thinking about like just disability in Lynch films in general. I'm sure there's writing about this that I have not read, but I'm thinking about when I did the episode about Freaks, how one of the things that we noted was that the camera is at eye level with the little people, as opposed to like usually when little people are shot by normal size, quote unquote normal size people, it's like looking down on them. And in Freaks, there's he has a more momentous no, in Freaks it's at eye level, and in this there's like a momentous almost proportion. And I'm also thinking like obviously there's more references to the Wizard of Oz, right, with all of the little people actors that were in the film. And I think that I'm not saying this in to say like it's problematic, but I think that like Lynch kind of does use physical disability in this way to evoke this kind of like uncanniness, which I think could like potentially be a point of like criticality, and I think like obviously remain critical, but I also think like he does it so well that he kind of escapes criticism in this way. Like,
Yeah.
you know, people, don't, it's like, there's something like there's an uncanniness here, but there's also like a deep respect.
Right. And there's kind of like it's, there's always there's kind of an unflinching, a level of like, he's much more willing to portray disability than many other filmmakers, whereas maybe lots of filmmakers that don't know how to portray people with disabilities just completely avoid it in general and don't show people with disabilities, which is another kind of problematic thing. I also want to just really quickly correct myself where I said elevated chair. He's in a wheelchair. That's significant that he's in a wheelchair and not
for sure,
not just a regular chair. And he also uses a speaker box to amplify his voice. Which
yes,
is
and he's also like
facet.
separated by glass, except for his like butler who's in the room with him. It's like almost as if like literally you and me, almost as if like this is a person with like kind of a fragile immune system, or
to be kept completely isolated.
Yes, but he's controlling everything.
Right, he's powerful as well.
Yeah. So,
and then we could get into a metaphor for power and
oh god,
and how those in glass boxes, etc. And anyway,
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
Powerful people being kept away behind the scenes. We don't really see the people who are really controlling everything.
Right.
So we cut to Betty, Naomi Watts, in her pink cardigan, coming out of the airport, her arms linked with an old, innocent-looking woman, and the music is very hopeful and bright. And
totally changes tone.
Yes, total tonal shift. They exit the airport smiling, and they say this heartfelt goodbye where the older woman, her name's Irene, tells her she'll be waiting to see her on the big screen and wishes her luck before walking away arm in arm with her husband.
And she's like, oh, Betty, it's like almost it's like a complete trope of this like Midwestern woman. It's just like so innocent and sweet.
Betty is such an innocent name, such an old time name, right? It could be like Betty Grable. It could be Betty Schaefer from Sunset Boulevard. It's very like plucky, hopeful blonde gal.
Innocent girl just coming to Hollywood to follow her dreams.
So she gets in a cab, and we see the older couple again in traffic, and they're kind of smiling and in this very creepy, not of this world way. It's almost like sinister, like they know something that Betty doesn't.
They're just smiling so goonishly out of and they're looking opposite ways too, out each cab window. You're like, what? Like, what's going on with this couple? They are. I love these characters and how they return later on in the movie. But I won't speak on that yet.
We see the Hollywood sign, of course. The camera, we're like in the perspective of the camera as we walk up these steps into this courtyard where Betty will stay. It's this kind of gorgeous apartment complex. It's like a reference to Sunset Boulevard because it's got all these like vines. It's very like classic Hollywood architecture. Very classic old Hollywood apartments, and we can kind of see like Aunt Ruth works in the show business and maybe has some money. So Betty goes to meet the manager of the complex, and it is Mrs. Lenoir, Coco Lenoir, who is the fabulous keeper of the apartments, played by this old Hollywood starlet Ann Miller. So
it's so gorgeous.
Love her. More references to old Hollywood, of course, by using this old Hollywood actress. Can you describe how Coco Lenoir looks?
Yeah, so she is well, firstly, her face is heavily plastic surgeryed up. Like she's got a very narrow nose from multiple plastic surgeries. I think when we first see her, she's wearing is she wearing an all black outfit or an all red outfit? Either way, she wears a pearl necklace. She's got red lips. She's kind of got that she has faded blue eyeshadow actually and like very thin brows. And blue eyeshadow is a definite recurring thing in David Lynch's films. And she's got fabulous earrings. And she's older. She looks to be in like her 70s. And she's just pure glamour, effortless glamour, but extremely purposeful. She's like someone that you would see in all these old Hollywood films.
And also a reference to kind of faded glamour, or like a Norma
Right.
Desmond figure, because she's an older woman. And
Yeah.
I feel like older women are always kind of put in films as a reference to like faded glamour.
Yeah.
So she starts yelling at a resident who let their dog shit in the courtyard. I never know what to make of this. She also speaks about
Yeah.
a man who had a kangaroo that tore up the courtyard.
I honestly, well, the way I interpret it is that it's just something that David Lynch thought was funny.
Right, probably.
Also, like the idea of having a resident who had a kangaroo is just a funny thing. But we also see her personality a little bit there. She's being so sweet to Betty, but she is a tough girl. She runs the show.
So she takes Betty to her aunt's apartment and gives Betty a very warm welcome to the neighborhood. Betty is ecstatic with the place. She can't believe how glamorous it all feels.
She's like walking around smiling. She's like, "Oh my God." Like it's a beautiful place, but it's not I always find her reaction to be like so just very over the top. It's almost soap like where like this is the first kind of acting in this film that feels very soap operatic, as it were, and over the top.
Yeah, she's walking around the place in awe, smiling ear to ear, and we see the camera in her POV. It looms over the bed. She notices a woman's things sitting on the ground, like a purse and shoes. And isn't there also there's a robe on the bed with like a note for her?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, from her aunt.
Yeah, from her aunt. And robes, I feel like, are also important in this movie. Everything's important. She enters the bathroom. She giggles. She's looking at herself in the mirror. And then suddenly she sees the amnesiac woman in the shower naked. And silhouetted. So the first time these two women meet, Laura Herring is nude and her image is like fractured prismatically in the shower door. I think, foreshadowing of like the fractured identity. And Betty talks to her through the glass, thinking it's one of her aunt's friends.
Well, I also love that in that moment she notices that there's someone in the shower and she opens the shower door to confirm and then closes it. Like she's also just not like immediately frightened. Like her first instinct is curiosity rather than being frightened. She's drawn to it immediately. And then she's talking to her through the glass. She mistakes it as being her aunt's friend. She's like, she's so innocent. Like, why else would another woman be here? It has to be my aunt's friend.
Yes. And the woman looks terrified in the shower as Betty asks her questions about what happened. She mentions a car accident, and Betty leaves the bathroom apologetic, thinking she's the one intruding on her. It becomes clear that the woman doesn't know her own name or who she is or why she's there. And as she comes out of the shower and she sees a poster for the film Gilda starring Rita Hayworth, and she tells Betty that her name is Rita, naming herself after the poster. So this is very important because Gilda is another big reference in this film. There's a lot of like fractured and doubling of identities. The Gilda is, we just rewatched, or I rewatched it. You watched it for the first time. There's a lot of double identity going on in that film. The interplay between Rita Hayworth, the actress, and her biography. Rita Hayworth was born as Margarita Carmen Cancino, and she was her father, Eduardo Cancino, was Spanish but of Romani descent, and her mother was an American Irish woman, but she was, when she was first getting into, there's a really great episode about her on the podcast. You must remember this if you want to hear more about Rita Hayworth. But basically, when she was breaking into show business, she was deemed as like looking too Hispanic, so she was kind of ordered to get a bunch of plastic surgery to look more Anglo, and
devastating.
Yes, even though, you know, she was beautiful in any form.
Right.
And so there's the doubling of the Rita Hayworth and Rita Hayworth's alter ego as Gilda, and she's also said to be in Gilda. She's referenced as a woman without a past many times, which ties to the Rita character's amnesia.
And in Gilda, she's tied to a criminal kind of man.
Yes.
She's tied to the underground network of sorts. There's always ties to men in power that are sinister, and she's involved with a mob-like kind of figure, which similarly Rita, rather the unnamed woman at this point, the amnesiac woman, we'll find out how she's involved with forces beyond her control.
Yeah, and there's this book that I read a lot of to prepare for this episode.
Well, there's also, while you find the name of that, the idea of like triangular relationships in both of these films. 3 characters, also double identity.
Yeah, so the book is called, it's Mulholland Drive. It's just called Mulholland Drive and it's edited by Zina Giannopoulou, and it's like various essays by philosophers about this film, and one of the essays is called Identity and Agency in Mulholland Drive by A.E. Daham and F.D. Wardell, and they talk a lot about fractured identity in the film if you're interested in reading that. But yeah, there's and then, you know, the Laura Herring character, like being like a woman with an accent, I feel like also recalls, you know, Rita Hayworth's biography, and I feel like some of the Spanish language stuff that happens later also refers to the Rita Hayworth biography. So yeah, there's a ton going on there with that choice of name. Betty, being so innocent, tells Rita why she's there, and she tells her immediately of her Hollywood dreams. She's this kind of classic trope of the overzealous wannabe actress. She says she came all the way from Deep River, Ontario,
which is a reference
yes.
to that in Blue Velvet, the apartment complex that Isabel Rossellini's character lives in are the Deep River apartments.
And I also feel like this is it's important that she's from Canada, because she also says at another point that her aunt is away working on a film in Canada. And there's an old like show business joke of like when you're referring to someone as dead, you're saying they're acting in Canada. So, you know,
take that for what you will. Does the aunt actually exist? Do any of these people exist? We'll never know.
Rita, you said here in your note, Rita becomes unsteady, looking sexy in her red bathrobe.
Of course, I had to note that, and the fact that it's a red bathrobe, of course.
Important.
And also, she comes out of the shower full face of makeup, still looking beautiful, which
Right.
I
She's beat
love.
to the gods the entire film.
Beat to the gods, literally.
Rita says she needs to sleep, even though she's almost certainly concussed. And
But sweet Betty just tucks her in and lets her rest. She puts the robe over her and lets her fall asleep, which is sweet but misguided.
we cut to aerial views of downtown Los Angeles and looming buildings. We see these
this time in the day as well.
Time in the daytime. These two bosses are in suits, one played by Angelo Badalamenti himself. They enter this steel building, and we are in like an office. It's like a kind of a conference room where Adam Kesher, played by Justin Theroux, is talking to another guy about recasting the lead actress in the movie. The two men who we learn are the Castigliani brothers. The Castigliani brothers. They enter the boardroom and they sit, and Adam
also prototypical mob boss figures.
Yes, there's this. I mean, we saw, Mr. Roque. We see the Castigliani brothers. Like, there's the men pointing the gun at Rita in the beginning of the film. Like, there's crime involved here behind the scenes. And Adam is shown a picture of an actress named Camilla Rhodes, who's this blonde woman. And they remark that she is very beautiful. The brothers order an espresso, and the execs are very clearly trying to impress them. And they said that they got this, like, it's supposed to be the best espresso. Mr. Roque.
They're very careful. They want to impress these men. They're clearly also afraid of them in this moment. You can see by how they're trying to please them.
Palpable. Mr. Roque is listening via telephone in a dimly lit room by himself. Adam is confused why he's being shown a picture of a new actress, and one of the Castiglione brothers says, "This is the girl.
This is the girl."
And
as they're talking here, Adam, he keeps getting angrier, but it's finally said it's no longer your film to him, which he cannot accept that. He's not nearly at a point. He's also a very kind of arrogant kind of man, Adam, the director.
Mm-hmm.
He's also a Hollywood trope of the kind of director he is and the kind of guy that he is. And it's interesting. I like that. I mean, it's interesting to know that David Lynch just modeled his look after what Justin Theroux was actually wearing when he got off the plane, and his style. He looks very cool, but he's super cool.
He looked really cool in 2001.
Exactly. It's no longer your film.
Yeah, so the one of the Castiglione brothers, Angelo, takes a sip of the espresso and he rudely spits it out into his fresh cloth napkin.
Which he specifically requested from the poor waiter that is attending to him, he gives him the napkin and he goes, "Do you need anything else?" And it completely ignores him, and the waiter just steps back. Everyone's aghast as he spits it into this cloth napkin. It's so rude. And they start arguing with him too. They're like, "That was the finest espresso. It was highly recommended."
So the executives are shaking. There's confusion and pandemonium, but Castiglione keeps repeating, "This is the girl." And the man in the chair, Mr. Roque, is listening in, and he seems to be calling all the shots. These are the guys that work for him, but he's in charge. I feel like
the boss.
Coffee is also a very important motif in Lynch films. So now Adam is on the street. He's picking up his car from the valet, and he takes a golf club from his car and asks the driver of the Castigliani brothers' car if this is their car, and he smashes the windshield. And
also he has like a douchey ass Porsche with the top down,
and
of
rides
course.
off in his Porsche. So Betty tenderly wakes Rita up, and we see again the haunting room with Mr. Roke in the chair, and one of the executives enters and behind glass and lets him know that the director doesn't want the recasting. And Mr. Roke doesn't say anything, but then his subordinate speaks of shutting the movie down. And go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was just going to continue that on. Like, his silence is taken as a yes. So, I mean, this man, Mr. Roke, is a man of very few words. And the executive that was just in that meeting, he infers, he's also clearly intimidated. Everyone is clearly intimidated by this figure, and taking his silence as confirmation that yes, they'll shut the movie down. Is that what he goes, is that what you want, to shut everything down? And then silence, and he's like, okay, we'll shut everything down. And backs away slowly. You're like, oh shit. And then it fades to black.
So we now meet these two new guys who are both kind of sleazy looking, and they're in kind of a sleazy looking office, and one guy is blonde. He's wearing a leather jacket. The other guy has long greasy hair and is chewing on a toothpick. They're like shooting the shit and laughing, and greasy hair guy says something like talking about a car accident, and we kind of infer that this must be the car accident that Rita was in. And they also say something about like a guy's black book. And leather jacket guy pulls out his gun abruptly and shoots the other guy through his skull.
And his hair sticks up burnt through his bullet wound, which is like, there's like an element of slapstick in
this is like the funniest scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of like this guy is like kind of a hitman, we think. As he's wiping his fingerprints, and he's also he is, I believe, not just wiping his fingerprints, but also like wants to shoot off the gun again, so that the guy's hand has like residue of that on it, so it's like more so looks like he shot himself. But he accidentally shoots through the wall, and it hits a woman, and we can hear her like grunting in pain. And he goes over to the next room, and we see this woman saying, something bit me real bad. And it was kind of implied like, oh, because she's fat, like it doesn't hurt her, it just feels like a bug bite. It's like, it's a fat joke, and it's just like
a shitty fat joke.
I don't think it's funny, but like, you know, I'm like, oh, okay, one of the weaker points of the movie. But like, you said when you saw this in theaters, people were like uproariously laughing.
Yes, and I was like, okay, like, you know, during this whole sequence where, you know, it continues. So he goes up to her to attack her, basically, to try and finish her off, and he's very much manhandling her and pulling her out. And during that whole sequence of him starting to manhandle her, the audience in the theater that I was in was just continually laughing. And I'm like, there's a moment where it can be funny, and then it's like, for me watching that, I was like, it very quickly becomes not funny. But because she's a fat woman and like struggling, I feel like people kept laughing.
Yes.
So that I was just like, shut up. Like it.
Right. It's automatically comical because she's fat.
Exactly. And so as he's dragging her down the hallway to bring her back to the room where he shot the other guy, a cleaner sees him. He has a vacuum, and he's like, hey man, help me out. Like she's her bad. Help me, man. Hey, like, and the guy's just standing there completely silent and still watching. And once he gets back into the room, she's still struggling, and he shoots her in the back and she falls over. Also, like, I found that to be such a sad, intense moment. And I'm like, I don't find joy in seeing a woman struggle for her life. Like, I don't find that funny.
I know. It's like how I felt during Honora when everybody was like cracking up while she was like being manhandled and thrown about. And I was like, I actually don't. This is like one of those moments where I'm like the meme, the friend who's too woke, where I'm like, I actually don't find that funny, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. No, I didn't. I felt the same way. But then as he shoots the woman, we see the cleaner appear with his vacuum. He witnesses her get shot. And the cleaner tries to leave the room. He ends up shooting him. And as he does that, the vacuum starts whirring. And leather jacket guy, just everything just keeps going wrong. And he's annoyed at the sound of the vacuum. He shoots it. He's like, oh, finally, peace and quiet. He's had to do all this killing just to do his one hit. And then, of course, an alarm goes off, and the sound is blaring. And he's frustrated, and he makes his escape via a fire escape.
I'm just reading on mulhollanddrive.net about the hitman. He has mismatched eyes, one dark and one blue in Diane's in this part of the movie, but blue eyes in other scenes.
Oh, heterochromia, you say? My sister has that. Interesting.
Trivia. This black and comical, absurdly violent scene was unsurprisingly one of the scenes that caused problems with the ABC network. Rather than the standard gripe about slow pacing, they objected to the graphic detail of the central assassination and the black comic element of the stray bullet hitting the fat woman's buns. It's unlikely to be a coincidence that the executive viewed Lynch's cut of the pilot very shortly before the entire TV industry came under pressure from Washington in the immediate aftermath of the April 1999 Columbine High School massacre.
Interesting.
Interessante.
That is interesting that he has a brown and a blue eye, just like Betty and Rita.
Right.
That's a detail, but there's so many things that come up
because
researching this film that you don't.
Yeah,
I never noticed.
Well, Betty has blue eyes and Rita has brown eyes, so then he's got both.
Yeah.
There's a whole thread on mulhollanddrive.net just called Joe's Eyes.
Oh my God.
You could really like spend hours and hours on that website. It's really fun, actually.
Yeah.
So
I see.
Betty is talking he escapes right via the fire escape. So Betty is talking on the phone with her Aunt Ruth, and she mentions her aunt's friend Rita. And her aunt has no idea who she's talking about. We see the camera move ominously through the hallway and into the bedroom. Rita holds her head crying. Betty is concerned with what she's just heard, and as Rita's crying, Betty is giving her unrelenting empathy and good-natured will.
Even though her aunt is telling her, I don't know who that is. Who is that? That's not my friend. I didn't have anyone staying there with me.
Yeah, but Betty's like, but she's so sexy.
But she's so sexy. I love her. She's crying.
Rita thought that she would remember who she was when she woke up, but she still has no idea who she is.
And she's upset.
Betty
and of course,
go ahead.
Sorry, keep going. Oh, just of course that Betty she's continuing to try and help her. She's just taking on the task of helping Rita find her identity, which she absolutely doesn't have to, but she's like a Girl Scout about it. She's like so gung-ho.
Hi, this is Javon, your Blinds.com design consultant.
Oh, wow. A real person.
Yep. I'm here to help with everything from selecting the perfect window treatments to...
Well, I've got a complicated project.
No problem. I can even help schedule a professional measure and install. We can also send you samples fast and free.
I just might have to do more.
Whatever you need.
So the first room we're looking at is for...
Shop Blinds.com now and save up to 45% site-wide. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
BTW, FYI. Visit Nexplanon.com RN to learn about Nexplanon. It's an gestural implant, 68 milligrams radiopaque. Or ask your HCP IRL. Okay, TTYL.
So yeah, she's like, she's treating it like, like a movie mystery. She's like, she's opening Rita's purse, and the camera shows their eyes in close up, and they have like this immediate camaraderie. And to their surprise, Rita's purse holds thousands of dollars. It's stuffed with cash, and
they just keep pulling it out. It's endless.
And also inside is a mysterious blue key in this odd kind of triangular shape. I also noticed that Rita has like an old kind of 1930s manicure, which is in the half moon shape, which I feel
and they're red.
And they're red, which is probably, David Lynch really paid attention to those details, so I'm sure that's significant. Back on the street, Joe the hitman in his leather jacket is talking to a straight-based sex worker trying to garner some info. Her nipples are bulging through her shirt, is Carr's note here.
Well, it's significant because it's right there. I love the way that the woman who plays that character.
Yeah. And that is Rena Riffle, who she plays the sex worker named Lainey, and she also plays a sex worker in Showgirls. She plays Penny.
Oh, amazing.
And she also directed a movie called Showgirls 2, Pennies from Heaven. Anyway, keep going.
Oh, incredible. Oh my God. I need to watch. But he's the hitman's just trying to find out if any new girls have hit the street recently, and he's we can infer here that he's trying to look for Rita, who's missing. So we infer that that's his missing mark, basically. And she doesn't really have any info, but as he finishes talking to her, of course, he just slaps her on the butt, and he's like, "You let me know, all right?" Smack. Like he's this schmuck.
Casting trivia about Rena Riffle: David Lynch had offered Rena a role opposite Marilyn Manson in Lost Highway, but her agents turned it down due to nudity requirements. Rena was disappointed, but hoped that Lynch would remember her for future projects. In 2000, Rena was called in by casting director Joanna Ray to be put on videotape for Lynch's TV series pilot Mulholland Drive, a follow-up to Twin Peaks. She later got the good news that Lynch had given her the part, the series' regular role of Lainey, a mysterious homeless character who would get revealed throughout the series and come to a grand finale when the big secret is unfolded. Though the pilot turned out to be another groundbreaking masterpiece for Lynch, Disney Studios wanted a family-friendly oriented show and asked for changes which Lynch would not agree to.
Oh, interesting that's originally that her character would be a series regular, that she was going to be an important part of the plot of the TV series.
And there's a lot of theories that Lainey is like a shadow self of Betty. So Betty, back to Betty and Rita. Betty is questioning Rita and trying to help her remember any details about how she got the money. Adam is in his Porsche driving. His assistant, who is gorgeous, we love her. Sorry I keep going on these tangents, but I'm just...
Oh, no, it's good. I'm learning so many new things as well. I mean, seriously, every character that gets introduced to your life, there's a billion different things that you can start going down the rabbit hole about.
Yeah.
I can't believe that, that Lainey being a recurring character, it makes me wish it's also significant that she looks a lot like Betty.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think this is more like doubling. There's a lot of doubling with Betty and Diane and Lainey, and then the waitress. Okay. Adam is driving. He calls his assistant. He insists he's going home, and she's like, "Don't go home." And he's like, "I'm going home." He drives down this palm tree lined street, and there's that iconic fade into Betty's face lying down with the trees overlaid, like she's becoming one with the Hollywood landscape. They're one and the same.
Yeah. That's like one of the most famous shots in the film, that specific fade with the palm trees. And she's so like it's just that classic. I keep saying classic Hollywood, but it is like her classic Hollywood moment. She's still very hopeful, though anyone else in this situation as well, you'd think they'd be completely disturbed, but somehow she's got that can-do attitude throughout it. She just wants to solve the mystery.
It's very Kyle MacLachlan in Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
Naive and plucky and interested in a mystery.
But yeah, can't turn away.
So the two women are talking, and Rita remembers that she was going down Mulholland Drive. And Betty is like, well, that's where the accident must have been. So Betty is very excited about the prospect of investigating the crash. Back to Adam. Adam pulls up to his house with gold golf club in hand, and he sees a truck labeled Gene Clean. And as he walks into this modern Hollywood mansion, he sees his pool.
Cement.
He calls out for his wife, Lorraine. And
also the fact that he has a pool, perhaps a Sunset Boulevard
absolutely
reference.
Especially because he's so emasculated and cucked in this scene, just like the Sunset Boulevard character. He enters their bedroom where he finds his wife in bed with Billy Ray Cyrus, aka Gene Clean. And his wife says, now you've done it. Like, she's pissed that he's home. And
yeah. She's like, you're never home at this time. What the fuck?
I think it's interesting that in this scene, he's kind of like an inept cuck. Whereas like later, Betty/Diane is the cuck to him.
Yeah.
So he wordlessly pulls out Lorraine's jewelry from a drawer and walks out of the room with it. He goes to the garage and he grabs some house paint while Lorraine hurriedly dresses, and Billy Ray says something like, he's probably upset, Lorraine. And Adam pours...
And I just love that it's Billy Ray Cyrus in this moment, because there's something to be said too about, like, if you're looking at this film from a dream stance, or if you're taking it in if you're talking about this act of the film as, like, quote unquote, the dream sequence, Billy Ray Cyrus is definitely a dream figure, like someone that you would see on television all the time that just randomly pops into your dream like that. You're like, oh, why? It's this guy.
It's Billy Ray Cyrus.
He's
fuck Billy Ray Cyrus.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
as an aside, fuck Billy Ray Cyrus.
So Adam pours the pink paint all over Lorraine's jewelry, and she's like, fighting him, and he grabs her and puts her on the counter. And Billy Ray comes in and socks him in the face, defending her, and kicks Adam out of his own house.
And he's covered in this pink paint and getting back into his Porsche, and he's got a bloody nose.
Yeah, but it's almost like covered in blood.
Yeah, he doesn't fight it. He knows he needs to go. He's been cucked successfully. Successful cuck.
Back with Rita and Betty, they hide Rita's purse in an old hat box in the closet. Kind of more trappings of femininity, but like very outdated. Like, people don't have hat boxes anymore.
Bring back hat boxes.
I want a hat box. I'm like starting to develop a collection of hats, so I know
you actually really do need a hat box.
Yeah, I do.
Anyone does it too. My mother used to have a bunch of hat boxes. It was delightful. I'll go through them. My mother's from Beverly Hills too, so my mother is so cocoa coated, actually.
Coco Lenoir.
Coco Lenoir.
So Betty shakes Rita's hand like they're in agreement, like they're in this together now. Here we are back at Winky's, and we see the arrow to the entrance as Betty and Rita walk up to the payphone, which is reflected in the window. Betty calls the local precinct and inquires about the accident, winking at Rita. And
Yeah, she's like, oh, this fun little game that we're playing.
right.
It feels as though she's so excited by getting to play at this mystery, basically.
Betty inquires about the accident, and they say that there was an accident on Mulholland Drive, but then they ask for her name, and she hangs up the phone. We almost get the sense, like we do in Blue Velvet, that like the cops are in on it in this scene. You know, like there's like a sinister almost vibe to them, like asking what her name is. Inside the diner, inside the Winkies, they search the paper, but nothing shows up. And the blonde, important, Winkies waitress wears a name tag that says Diane.
This is our first introduction to the name Diane. Also Diane, of course, in Twin Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a Diane character in Sunset Boulevard? I don't think so, actually.
I don't think there is.
Diane. But Rita she looks at the name and she's remembering something. She gets triggered. A memory gets triggered by seeing the name Diane.
Mm-hmm. So Rita thinks of the name Diane Selwyn, and she thinks that might be her name. So they look up Diane Selwyn in the phone book. They try to call her, and Rita says something very significant, which is like, it's weird to be calling yourself. And more collapsing of identity here.
Right.
But it's not her voice. And the women are like sitting very close to each other, ear to ear. Their intimacy is very palpable. And they speculate, well, Betty speculates that maybe Diane Selwyn knows who Rita is. As an aside.
I love this aside.
Yes, as an aside, this is important. Diane Selwyn. The most famous Selwyn is Edgar Selwyn, who co-founded Goldwyn Pictures. Presumably, that's the reference being made there. So he co-founded MGM. And the Selwyns were from Ontario.
How quaint. My goodness, it all comes together. I wonder if there was a Deep River reference there with them too. The Selwyns. Yeah.
So back at Adam's house, a big guy walks into the house looking for Adam, presumably part of the mob again. And Lorraine tells him to get lost. He persists. She climbs on him, and Jean, Billy Ray, tries to attack him, but the guy just bops both of them easily and continues on his search.
And this is another kind of slapstick moment in the movie where like he's getting attacked. Like Lorraine jumps on this guard, basically this mob guy, and he balls up his fist, and you see him just whack her up top, and he keeps yelling Adam's name. But there's moments of slapstick throughout this film, like these moments of comical relief, where I can't tell too if it's vestiges from the pilot, like if that's the vibe was supposed to be so much lighter. You can still see that there were moments of like it was a very like comically done show in a way. And then right after that, you see another aerial shot of Los Angeles at night. So Los Angeles just keeps coming back and back. I feel like each day kind of, well, and also this is all happening within one day so far.
Yeah, I'm always confused a little bit about the timeline. So we're in this kind of like seedy, I don't know if it's a hotel or if it's like, he's visiting, basically he's in this seedy building visiting a guy named Cookie. And Cookie, who I think might be his dealer. Cookie says there's a problem with his cards. And Cookie is played by Gene Silva. Oh no, he is the manager of a dilapidated hotel where Adam Kesher is staying after being thrown out of his house by his wife. Cookie warns Adam that his credit cards are maxed out, but that whoever is looking for him knows where he is. So that's his first scene appearance. And then in the second scene that he's in, Cookie makes an appearance as the MC of Club Silencio.
Which I literally just now put together. That is incredible.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that he shows up as like the MC, and he's also very well as the hotel manager. He's sympathetic to Adam, and he's essentially just warning Adam, whoever you're hiding from, they know where you are, and they're gonna find you. And he also lets him know you're maxed out, you're broke, basically. And Adam's like, what? Like, I'm not broke.
And I also feel like there's like something else going on with Cookie. Like, he's not just a hotel manager. Like, there's something else, like in like a seedy sort of underworld connection here. That's why I was like, maybe he's a dealer.
Right.
So
what makes you think that? Like, do you just get the sense of that?
I just get the sense that they have dealings beyond him staying at this hotel.
Yeah, and how did they get connected, and why does he stay at this specific hotel when he needs done? And he clearly also goes there.
Like, he clearly has money. He could stay at a nice hotel.
Totally. So he's going there for nefarious reasons often, and that's his hideout.
Yes. MulhollandDrive.net says Cookie obviously knows Adam Kesher. Why does he know him? They're friends, and Cookie has a history with him. You can see that he's protecting him, but that guy is also in show business. He is the MC of the club. And also the Park Hotel and Club Silencio were filmed at the same location.
Oh my God. Does
Tower
it say that
Theater.
on mulholland-drive.net?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Mulholland-drive.net.
Whoever created that, you're a real one.
Gino Silvia Gino had been asked only to do the role of the MC. He shot that scene. It took about a day, and then he said, I had finished the day about 4 p.m. We were shooting downtown, and my wife owns a dance studio in Hollywood. So I drive over there on my way home and call my answering machine to check my messages. There are these 3 frantic messages. Gino, oh my God, call us back as soon as you can. This is Frank, the AD on Mulholland Drive. You got to come back. You've got to come back. They were they were like nuts. And I called back and they said, can you come back now? And I said, what happened? Did you guys burn the film? He said, David wants to know if you want to play another part. I said, when? Right now. Can you come back to the set? I said, he wants me to play another part now at the same set. I go back there and I drive into the lot. 100 walkie-talkies go off. Gino's here. It was echoing across the block. It was so weird. I said, look, before anything happens, I need to talk to David. Give me a walkie-talkie. So I get David and I say, David, what am I doing? He said, Gino, I'm so glad you got back. I have an idea. I think it will be some fun. I said, do you want me to change my look, change my hair, or shave maybe? He said, no, I want you to look exactly the same. Then he said, what it's going to be, this is your day job. The other one's your night job. I had no idea. I still have no idea, but I'm just loving this. David was so happy. He said, that was great, Cookie. He kept calling me Cookie. What was funny to me was that nobody makes movies like this. That's like guerrilla filmmaking, except the guy is one of the top directors in the world. That's what you would do if you were in college, but he can pull it off because of his incredible vision and true collaboration. That's what's fun about it.
Wow, that is an incredible story. The fact that David Lynch was making these plot points up as he went, and yet they've become... This is the thing that I find really funny and also fascinating about David Lynch, is that like we can read into all of his intentions so much, and we're like, this is all so thoughtfully planned out and careful, and all these references and connections are purposeful, and oftentimes it's being done on the fly.
Yes.
Which I really appreciate, because then also it kind of makes you feel foolish for dissecting things or reading into
so true
things and so deeply, but it also you can't tell, because sometimes it is extremely purposeful. Even like, for instance, with like Laura Palmer, like she wasn't supposed to be the character that she was, and she, during filming, he enjoyed that actress. What's that actress's name that plays Laura? He loved her
Cheryl
performance.
Lee?
Cheryl Lee, yes. He loved her performance so much just in that picnic scene with her and Donna that he decided to make her a main point of the show. So it's just really interesting to hear how he worked. And also, yeah, that would be insane. That's like so unheard of that you call an
Right.
actor like that for a new role same
You
day.
gotta come back.
Well, and it also makes me wonder like what they were gonna do in Club Silencio instead of have him as the MC. I wonder.
No, he was always going to be the MC. It was they didn't
Oh,
know if
but
he
it
was going to be
was.
the hotel manager.
I see. I see. Okay.
So, he's warning Adam, and Adam doesn't realize the severity of his situation. And he calls his assistant again and asks her to check his money situation. And she says he's suddenly bankrupt. And she asks if he knows someone called the Cowboy. And she thinks that this guy is connected to what's happening and that he should meet with this cowboy. Things are about to get stranger. He must go to meet this cowboy at the top of Beechwood Canyon. And there's a corral up there. And she offers him to stay at her place in the meantime. He doesn't think it's a good idea. We obviously are like, they're fucking, right?
I love this flirtation that happens. Like we see also too that he's we don't learn that much about Adam's personal life, but you can tell that he's a sleazy guy.
Yeah, he's a sleazy guy. So we cut to the looming steady camera in the courtyard. Betty and Rita make plans to go over to Diane Selwyn's address at the Sierra Bonita apartments.
And this is where too it's you have the same kind of like unsettling music that you had in the diner right before they round the corner to see the trash woman man thing and like the same, it's back to that same kind of camera move that's on what I presume is a jib or a crane. And I feel like the camera there is another person. It's like almost like we're creeping around through the courtyard. We're watching. And so they're making a plan to go over to Diane Selwyn's address in Sierra Bonita. But they hear a knock on the door.
And it's an older woman who says that someone is in trouble and something bad is happening. She's fashioned like almost like sort of a fortune teller. Like she's got this weird sort of cloak on. And Coco comes to retrieve her. Her name is Louise Bonner. And apparently Louise just acts like this sometimes. Louise is played by Lee Grant, who is another old Hollywood actress. She's still alive to this day. She was blacklisted by the House of Un-American Activities. She was a communist queen. She started as a ballerina, and her first film was in 1951 in the William Wyler film Detective Story, where she won Best Actress at Cannes for her first movie. But then the next year she got blacklisted because of her defense of another actor who was blacklisted.
What a crazy time to the in that era to be blacklisted for any seemingly communist views. And we're gonna get back to that pretty soon. Can't wait. We need a new Hays Code. It's gonna be awesome. Essentially, that's what it feels like. There's hardly any sex in movies. It's all quite bleak, as it were.
And that's part of why I was so depressed when David Lynch died, because I'm like, we're entering this cursed era. All of these great erotic filmmakers are going to be dead soon. David Lynch, Paul Verhoeven, David Cronenberg. Like, it scares me.
It scares me as well. But at least, at least there are other countries making films that still include those subjects. But in this country, it's just so much harder to get films made that have any aspect of adult sex. Everyone wants movies that are like Steven Universe 3, loving to be a child.
I love how people like us are still hung up on Steven Universe being like the arbiter of the death of culture, even though it ended like years ago. But
I fucking hate
something
Steven Universe.
shifted.
Sorry.
Something shifted when that show came out.
God, I fucking hate it. I'm just like, and like Adventure Time. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, they're just
shit like that.
I know, I'm just like, okay, it's not like, sure, you can like that stuff. It's not all across the board bad, whatever. But I just like, as an adult watching that, I'm like, I'm not relating to this. And people are like, oh, people. Sorry.
Guys, don't hate me because of my creature butlers views about cartoons.
Well, it's not all cartoons, but the haterism is strong with those two, especially Steven Universe. It's like the tender queer battle cry, and I can't deal with it. Anyway,
controversial. No, it's not. It's not controversial here.
It's so brave. Not here, yeah.
So, Louise sees Rita slightly in the doorway, and the camera quickly pushes in on Rita's troubled face. Adam is driving down a dark road up into the hills to the corral. He turns off his headlights. We see him get out of the car. There's a bull skull hanging over the corral. The lights flicker, and the cowboy appears out of the darkness. And the cowboy is played by, what's this guy's? There's so many actors in this. Monty Montgomery.
And Monty Montgomery, incredible name.
It's a great name.
And his outfit is so, it's fabulous. He's wearing this red scarf, red hanky around his neck. He's flagging Fisting Switch. That's right. And he's got his big cowboy top hat on. Not top hat, it's a cowboy hat. And he's also got this like plaid peacoat situation on. He's very pale and kind of ghostly. He feels like a ghost. He just appears out of nowhere, and he's in front of him. And the way he is talking to Adam is extremely.
And he says to Adam, like, kind of anxious to get to it, are ya? The cowboy is like, he's very calm and even. He questions Adam's intentions. Adam is like very arrogant. He always gets his way, and you can see like his fury at this very slow sort of metaphorical line of questioning. And
because the cowboy won't just ask him a direct question. It's very coded the way he's speaking to Adam. He's talking in circles, but he's like trying to make a point, but he's beckoning Adam to be patient, and he says at one point, you're too busy being a smart aleck, and he wants him to listen to him rather than get all huffy and puffy about what's being asked of him.
Yeah, so I'm gonna read a little bit. Well, first of all, he says something to the whole movie, we've been sort of getting the sense that things are fixed, they're rigged. Adam doesn't have a choice who he casts in his movie. Like, everything is like there's fate and choice as like a big theme here. And it's almost like things are preordained. Like, people don't really have the power that they think they do. And he says something to the effect of like, a man's attitude determines, how things will go for him in life. It kind of this allusion to like, it doesn't really matter. There's really no choice. And like, things are just going to happen to you.
Exactly.
MulhollandDrive.net says the cowboy's words to Adam about a buggy and the one that is driving it refer to the concept of fate reminiscent of Greek Stoicism. This school of philosophy advocates absolute determinism and employed such example as the following. That just as a dog, supposing him attached to a car, if indeed he is disposed to follow, both is drawn, or follows voluntarily, making an exercise also of free power, in combination with necessity, that is fate. But if he may not be disposed to follow, he will altogether be coerced to do so. At the same,
so you get this kind of ring around, in the way he's speaking.
Well, he's like, how many drivers are in a buggy? There's one driver. Well, I'm driving this buggy, basically, he says.
He's in control. He's this authoritarian figure, and seemingly you have no idea who he is or where he's come from or who he's attached to and why.
And the same, of course, holds good in the case of men. Stoics would say the free will of a man consists in his attitude towards what is inevitably to happen. The task of the wise man is to realize nature and hence fate, and to align himself in order to be happy. Rebellion only leads to distress. I believe, writes the writer of MulhollandDrive.net, this to be the film's central message. Kesher starts a fight with the movie executives who may destroy him, but the destruction is of a cosmic nature. Despite his resistance, Kesher's existence dissolves at fast pace. He's expelled from home. He wanders about places that, in fact, do not provide refuge. He must accept his destiny in order to go on with his life. And this is exactly what happens in the second part. Adam's biography is rewritten, and now he's a successful filmmaker going to marry Camilla. The cowboy stands in for fate that drives the buggy of life. He is clinical, and by his absurd appearance, a character of no specific qualities. Fate is faceless. Unlike the bum behind Winkies, who is the devil and God at the same time. Together they present the execution of fate. So these kind of like supernatural entities throughout, right? The cowboy, the homeless man behind the Winkies, like these kind of like enigmatic figures that have like understanding of what they are in the popular imagination, but are so like representational in Lacanian sense that they almost like lose meaning.
Right, and they're these almost prophetic characters that are the driver of whatever supernatural force is behind it. And I mean, this kind of cowboy character reminds me of a figure like the Giant in Twin Peaks, that only appears in supernatural moments. So there's already an air of kind of supernaturalness or magic in this interaction at the corral. And it's also like it gets dropped in this way that it all feels unsettling. And the way he's talking to this actor, I love how he plays this part.
He's great. And there's also like some connection here between Coco and the cowboy, because she doesn't use foul language. She says horse pucky and smart aleck instead of bullshit and smart ass. And that's kind of exactly how the cowboy talks.
I almost feel like these characters are David Lynch.
Solid gold.
Solid gold, buddy.
And in the scene between Rita and Betty, the sex scene, above the mirror, Aunt Ruth has a collection of hats, one of which is a cowboy hat.
Oh, my.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate Pina Colada and Thai iced coffee flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
So, lots of little references to him. I don't know. Why do you think he's a cowboy? I mean, we kind of talked about it, like these enigmatic sort of representational figures.
Well, I don't entirely know, but something I saw on Mulholland-Drive.net is that David Lynch did an episode of a miniseries called Le Français vous parle, The Cowboy and the Frenchman, where a Frenchman and a cowboy meet by a corral. I mentioned this. There's a mention of this in Mulholland Drive, who at least by name French, and he goes to meet the cowboy at a corral. And then there's also a funny note that in the 1997 film Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion, Justin Theroux actually plays a cowboy, which is just a funny little coincidence there. But him being the
cowboy as like a figure of the West, right? This is such like a West Coast film, obviously like particularly Hollywood, but there's this, this figure. I'm also thinking of like Westerns as a genre.
Right.
I'm thinking about like the way that there are all these, I'm thinking about like the movie Nope, right? And like how there are all these like ranches in the desert of outside LA that like assist in the movie industry in these ways, and like the connection between like that rancher showbiz culture and Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like obviously like a lot of Hollywood history going on here.
And the cowboy, this is his first appearance in the film, and later on he shows up in a very small blip at and we'll get to this later, but I've just mentioned it now, that he shows up later in the film passing by in his cowboy hat as a man at Justin's and Camilla's party, where they get engaged. So he passes through, and it's a character that Diane sees. So that's just a little egg there, which I missed a couple times actually.
So the cowboy tells him to choose the girl that was chosen for him. The lead girl is not up to him. And he says to Adam, "You will see me one more time if you do good. You will see me 2 more times if you do bad." And the cowboy walks away, and the light over the corral dims, like almost like in this like supernatural way. And Adam is left to ponder.
And he just disappears.
Yeah, he just disappears. And Adam is left to ponder what he's been told.
Yeah. And then we see the Hollywood sign in the next shot, which again is this LA character. LA just continues to be the transitional character between each scene or each little world that we're being shown. And we're back to the apartment with Rita and Betty. And they're running lines. Betty's doing running lines with Rita for an audition that she has coming up. And
that Betty is kind of cracking, like the way she's playing it is like kind of bad, it's kind of like this corny dialogue, and she cracks up at the end with this like soap opera-esque dialogue. We're going to talk about that dialogue more in her audition scene, but the two women have kind of, Rita is so innocent, right? Like she isn't this femme fatale character yet, and she says to Betty like, "Oh, you're so good," like she's something I love about the femme fatales in David Lynch movies is like they have like such vulnerability, like Dorothy Valens in Blue Velvet. There's this article I read called "From Irony to Narrative Crisis: Reconsidering the Femme Fatale in the Films of David Lynch," and that deconstructs his the way that Lynch uses the character of the femme fatale that I read. I read so much, dude.
Yeah,
for this.
I seriously. Well, something that I was thinking about with this scene is like, so we have a clear kind of like, there's been this identity split, and you see the women getting closer at this point in the film. It's kind of getting more and more palpable that they're connecting more, and Rita is, in my eyes, mirroring a lot of Betty's behavior. Like she's on this kind of, she's been on the receiving end of Betty's optimism and pluckiness, and she's now eager to help Betty do her audition. She's like absorbing and kind of she's learning about what her own identity might be through Betty, and perhaps absorbing some of Betty's identity.
Exactly. She's becoming Betty.
Yes.
And that will like, it just happens more and more. There was this article that we both read called "No Hay Banda, and Yet We Hear a Band: David Lynch's Reversal of Coherence in Mulholland Drive" by Jennifer A. Hudson, which talks about this. And this is one of those scenes where, you know, they're kind of like melding into each other, and she's like, I mean, Rita really has no self, right? Because she's doesn't remember herself. So she, right, like you said, she's taking on,
right.
She is becoming this very like mommy girl thing.
Well, and it's interesting. Yeah, you see her as, yeah, she's so as a baby. I mean, she looks. It's also interesting, like this character who's like this voluptuous woman, who, when she loses her sense of self, like how do you? It kind of speaks to how we form our identity, and this is where you could get into a lot of Lacanian theory about how we form identity and how we form a sense of self, and how our perception of ourself versus how others see us factors into what we ultimately define ourselves as and how we see ourselves. And I think this movie is so much too about how we see ourselves and kind of the all of the troubles that come with that. And then specifically you have this, obviously we're in a setting here where there's two women that want to be actresses who are being seen through the eyes of all these men, and how their success and failure is defined by who they are and what the opportunities they're given are. And that's like what happens as a woman in any field, but particularly in Hollywood. There's always women, the way we perceive women and the way women are perceived and treated. And this is a huge theme in Sunset Boulevard of like the aging starlet that is, you know, you are beloved only at one point in your life, or that you're only beloved if you're being if you're pandering to the eyes of those who are perceiving you and doing what you're being an actor in your life. I just think there's so much to talk about in this film about how women are perceived and how women ultimately have not a lot of control about how they are how they're moving through the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yo estaba bien por un tiempo, volviendo a sonreír. Luego anoche te vi, tu mano me tocó y el saludo de tu voz. Te hablé muy bien y tú, sin saber que he estado llorando por tu amor, llorando por tu amor. Luego de tu adiós sentí todo mi dolor, sola y llorando, 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 llorando. No es fácil de entender que al verte otra vez yo estoy llorando. Yo que pensé que te olvidé, pero es verdad, es la verdad, que te quiero aún más, mucho más que ayer. Dime tú qué puedo hacer, no me quieres quedó